So, highly requested video, deep dive on the ICE electric shock gloves. So, ICE is preparing to spend between $10 and $20 million on these electric gloves. And when I heard this story, I was already horrified. But then I noticed something that kind of made me stop. The company that is making them is actually based here in Kentucky. I live in Louisville, Kentucky. So the second I saw that, I decided to do some digging into exactly who was making these things, and who's already using them and what happened when they were used before. So the company is called Compliant Technologies. It's based in the Lexington area, and the Department of Homeland Security plans to purchase thousands of its gloves, or the acronym is GLOVES, gloves, which stands for Generated Low Output Voltage Emitter, for ICE's Homeland Security investigations and enforcement and removal operations personnel. They call these things conductive distraction and de-escalation devices, but it took me about 5 minutes of research to find out that a man in Kentucky has already died as a result of these gloves. So before I tell you about the guy who went into cardiac arrest in a Kentucky correctional facility as a result of these gloves, I want to start by saying it's not just going to be used on immigrants and prisoners. These things are already in public schools. Omaha, Nebraska bought 40 pairs for its school resource officer program. 29 out of their 34 SROs were trained and authorized to use them in middle school and high schools. Omaha police actually say the gloves were deployed twice in their schools. So we can actually afford to electrically shock the children but not feed them. And I'm sorry, but if you're a fully grown, trained, and physically capable adult and you cannot physically restrain a literal child without reaching for an electrical pain compliance device, you definitely shouldn't be a cop. After the public learned about this, parents and students protested their use, so I'm not the only person asking why the hell an electrical pain compliance weapon is anywhere near a child at school. Just a little bit about the freak that made these before I get to the dirty details. So the guy that made these is named Jeff Nicklaus. He's a former Army Black Hawk helicopter pilot who served in Afghanistan and Somalia. So the company is veteran-owned, privately held. So unfortunately, we don't have a publicly traded company with public shareholders to look at. Otherwise, I'm sure that would be a very interesting conversation. But Nicklaus has reportedly described President Donald Trump as anointed by God. Yeah, very conspiracy-minded individual. On a 2025 podcast, there was a discussion about a fatal collision between a passenger jet and an Army Black Hawk helicopter near Washington. And he invoked the vaccine conversation and criticized Biden's administration for their approach towards women and LGBTQ people serving in the military. And this is the man behind the company positioned to receive millions of our federal dollars for electrical shock gloves. And crazy thing is that the most disturbing stuff that I found in my research was not about the owner of the company. It was what police departments themselves have said about these gloves. So there was an incident in 2022. The assistant chief of the Cape Girardeau Police Department in southeastern Missouri purchased these electric shock gloves for his officers after learning about them at a trade show. And his employees, he said, just could not get enough of them. His exact words were, "They have grown really attached to the shock gloves." And he went on to explain that they allow their wearer to inflict pain without leaving those sort of marks that could look bad to witnesses or leave an officer vulnerable or a department vulnerable to lawsuits. This is his exact quote. "In today's society, everyone's filming everything. Everybody has a cell phone. If an officer punches someone on camera, that can go viral in an instant. Even a standard taser leaves puncture wounds." But he ends up describing the advantage of the gloves like this. Another direct quote. "The glove is low optic and it looks better on video and it looks better to those witnesses. With a glove, there are no burn marks or scars." What? It looks better on video? It looks better to the witnesses? There are no burn marks or scars? We're talking about a device designed to inflict pain on another human being until they comply. And one of the advantages being discussed by law enforcement is that people might not be able to know what you're doing. Not that it's more humane, not that it causes less suffering, that it looks better on video. And this isn't some weird exception, because I kept digging and I keep finding law enforcement officials talking about these things in terms of liability. Nelson County Jailer Justin Hall, direct quote, "It's been a great tool as far as mitigating liability." Another member of the Floyd County Sheriff's Department, "I highly recommend these gloves to anybody that's looking for a utility that they can use that is conducive to not leading to lawsuits." Read those statements again. Mitigating liability, conducive to not leading to lawsuits, low optic, it looks better on video, There are no burns or scars. To me, this isn't me speculating what law enforcement might like about this technology. They are telling you. And that's what I feel like is a very big piece of this conversation we are not talking about. They didn't just create this technology as a tool to assist with compliance. The appeal is low visibility. That is what they like about these gloves. If you say an officer grabbed you and electrically shocked you with his glove, but the glove leaves no obvious burn marks or scars, and the officer says he didn't activate his gloves, then what? It's your word against theirs. If somebody watching a cell phone video can't even tell that the electricity is being delivered because all they see is an officer touching somebody with what looks like a normal glove, then the use of force itself becomes harder for an outside observer to document. Now, accountability has to depend on body cam footage, device records, internal reporting, whether the department even accurately documents its own officers' use of force. And speaking of use of force, let's talk about how these gloves work. Okay, these gloves are capped at a hard operational limit of 380 volts. And just so you have something familiar to compare that number to, a normal wall outlet in an American home is about 120 volts. A 240 volt circuit is what we would use for like heavy appliances like a dryer or a stove. These gloves are capped at 380 volts. Think about how many people are walking around with pacemakers, AICDs, wearable cardiac life vests, implanted medication pumps, other medical devices. Think about how many people have heart problems that are not visible from the outside. An ICE agent isn't going to know someone's complete medical history before they grab them. So what happens when one of these people gets grabbed and is electrified with a glove? What happens when that person has a cardiac condition that nobody can see? What happens when somebody dies and we find out afterward that the officer had no idea that they had an implanted cardiac device? The manufacturer's own manual, which you can look up, warns against using devices on certain populations that ICE routinely encounters. Elderly people, small children, pregnant women, people with severe disabilities, people with obvious health conditions. The manual explicitly says nobody should use the glove for verbal defiance, belligerence, punishment, torture, horseplay. Sit with that for a second. If your electric compliance device needs a warning explicitly telling people not to use it for punishment or torture, maybe we should have a larger conversation before the federal government spends $20 million putting them in ICE agents' hands. And lastly, I want to share the story of the man that passed away in my state from these gloves. His name was Jonathan Mansfield. He was 43 years old. And on September 27th, 2024, he was arrested in Richmond, Kentucky for public intoxication. Not nothing too crazy. He was fucked up in public. According to his wife's wrongful death lawsuit, he was shocked 27 times with the electric glove and another 13 times with tasers. There was a separate Madison County Sheriff's Office investigative report that counted 23 applications of the glove and 13 direct laser or taser shocks and I think 2 taser probe deployments. So there's a little bit of a discrepancy in the numbers, but either account describes extraordinary amounts of electrical force against one man. And according to the jail's use of force policy, those gloves were not to be applied for more than 15 seconds because extended exposure can cause impaired breathing, sudden cardiac arrest, increased blood pressure, altered blood chemistry. Yet, according to the lawsuit, on 2 occasions, officers applied the glove to Mansfield for approximately once for 40 seconds and another time for 99 seconds. And there's no justification for tasing somebody in some form or fashion for 40 times in the span of about an hour and 20 minutes and then placing him in a full body restraint. He became unresponsive. He suffered cardiac arrest, was hospitalized, and died October 10th of 2024. His wife has filed the wrongful death lawsuit, but ultimately public intoxication charge is what costed him his life, and he was never even convicted. He was arrested for public intoxication. He entered government custody alive and was repeatedly subjected to electrical force and a full body restraint. And he suffered cardiac arrest and died. And before you look up the article, yes, he had methamphetamine in his system. The Fayette County coroner attributed his death to an accidental overdose involving delayed complications of methamphetamine intoxication. But his treating doctors at the University of Kentucky, the physician and the internal investigation, concluded that the use of force is what caused Mansfield to suffer cardiac arrest. So when people say, oh, well, he had meth in his system, it's giving George Floyd rhetoric. Like, oh, he didn't die from the knee on his neck, he died from fentanyl. His wife is now asking a court to hold the people involved accountable for his death. And I'm not here to scare you. I'm here to make you readily aware. You are going to see more of this. People are going to die.